Near evening, an exhausted Rhine bid farewell to blacksmith Boris and returned to the Habsburg manor. After hastily taking care of dinner, he fell asleep deeply in the dormitory. The next morning, the young servants were gathered together, and they were greeted by a tall and burly man walking towards them. This burly man had blond hair stiff like the bristles of a wild boar, thick brows over big eyes, a resolute face, and a bastard sword hanging at his waist, which gave him a very steady presence when he walked. "I am your swordsmanship instructor, Humbert. What you will be learning is the basic swordsmanship that all militia must master. Has anyone among you learned swordsmanship before?" Having said this, the burly man scanned the group with his large eyes. Only George somewhat excitedly raised his right hand, saying, "Reporting to Instructor Humbert, I've learned." "What kind of swordsmanship? For how long?" "Basic swordsmanship as well, for about 2 years, I guess." George seemed to recall his learning process, his intermittent practice amounting to about 2 years in total. He had intended to understate the amount of practice to highlight his natural talent for swordsmanship, but under Humbert's piercing gaze, he ended up revealing the truth. Humbert nodded and said, "Anyone else?" No one responded. "If no one else will, then you. Come up here and demonstrate the basic swordsmanship you've learned." "Ah? Me?" "Demonstrate." "All right." Clearly, George was a bit nervous facing the robust instructor Humbert. After taking the iron wooden sword that Humbert handed him, George took up a swordsmanship starting pose and began to hack and chop vigorously. The servants, having never learned basic swordsmanship, watched with great interest, thinking that George executed the basic swordsmanship quite well. "Stop. Not bad. You may step down," Humbert said with a slight frown, waving his hand. Oh, okay. Instructor." George, having received praise from the instructor, was visibly elated. However, Ryan could see that Humbert did not seem satisfied with George's demonstration of basic swordsmanship. Ryan, however, thought to himself that George was quite good, both in terms of strength and proficiency with the techniques, at least far better than himself, because he hadn't learned basic swordsmanship. George returned to the group with a smile, seemingly very delighted that he had received the instructor's praise on the first day of swordsmanship training. The group of servants, led by Humbert, headed to the training ground in the middle of the outer courtyard. The real second-generation kids did not come today. This was the servants' first time at the training ground, and they couldn't help looking around curiously. Under the awning there were blunt two-handed swords, one-handed swords, shields, riding spears, and all sorts of training gear like training armor and thick padded jackets. But all these had nothing to do with the servants. The instructor led them to a place with only wooden short swords hanging, pointed, and said, "There, each of you take a short sword, and after you've got it, line up." Suddenly the group noisily went up and each person took a sword. "What's this? Wooden swords? A child's toy? My 5-year-old brother plays with this kind of thing," Freckles said disdainfully, looking at the wooden sword. "George, the swordsmanship you just did was quite something. I feel like you're much better than me." "Hey, Freckles, have you also learned basic swordsmanship before?" George asked, surprised. "Of course, my uncle is a mercenary. I learned a bit from him since I was young, but I've nearly forgotten it all," Freckles boasted with pride. After all, in his opinion, when it came to swordsmanship among all the young servants, he was the second strongest after George. "Not bad, George and Freckles. It looks like you two are going to shine," the baker's son exclaimed admiringly. "Yeah, now a certain someone can't attract attention by fixing hooves anymore, right? Men should be all about physical strength." Freckles glanced sideways at Rhine and said, "You." George was becoming impatient to hear more, But Ryan shook his head, dismissing George's desire to argue with the others. After all, it was just idle talk, and he didn't lose anything from it. Arguing with a bunch of fake second generations was pointless. And who said that if you have a foundation in swordsmanship, I definitely couldn't catch up? Ryan glanced at the 2 skill points reserved on his panel, his eyes flickering. "Eh? This wooden sword isn't quite what I expected," Ryan exclaimed as he grasped the wooden sword, his eyes immediately lighting up. This wooden sword seemed to be made of oil-soaked ironwood. Not only was it tough and durable, but its weight was also nearly the same as a real iron sword, making it the best possible training sword. Indeed, as the group of pretentious nobles got a hold of the swords, they realized the truth. I knew it. How could the Earl's family use ordinary wooden swords? So they are made of ironwood after all. Once all the pages had an ironwood sword in hand, the swordsmanship instructor Humbert began to shout loudly. "Now, I will demonstrate the basic sword techniques you need to master. Basic sword technique number 1, striding thrust. Basic sword technique number 2, striding downward slash. Basic sword technique number 3, striding upward sweep." The basic sword techniques consisted of these 3 moves, but Humbert's actions were much quicker and more powerful than those of the thick-browed boy. The same set of movements had a world of difference when executed by the 2 of them. The pages watched Humbert's demonstration attentively, and following his teachings, soon began to swing their ironwood swords, trying to imitate him. Without trying, one could never know. Once they tried, they were shocked. Although the 3 movements of basic swordsmanship seemed simple, they were still quite difficult for most pages, including Ryan, who had never practiced swordsmanship in either of his lives. They needed to not only swing the sword properly, but also coordinate their steps, syncing hands and feet together. Such a body coordination couldn't be achieved without a lot of practice and wouldn't come together in a short time. And so, under the scorching sun, a group of young lads sweated profusely, roaring as they tirelessly swung their ironwood swords, practicing the basic sword techniques. Do you want to be able to survive when facing danger? Humbert corrected each person's movements while shouting words of encouragement with his robust voice. It seems he was quite accustomed to this method of training. Yes, a group of boys who had never been sweet-talked couldn't help but respond passionately and in unison. Good. According to the key points of the movements I just mentioned, practice repeatedly. Keep practicing. Turn it into a natural instinct of the body. Humbert continued to encourage the group of pages while also starting to explain the key points of the basic sword techniques. The striding thrust emphasizes the use of leg strength to transmit the power from the lower half of the body through the waist to the arm wielding the sword, so it's essential to master the linkage of the muscles throughout the body. You have practiced the basic swordsmanship and your comprehension has improved. You have grasped a new skill, basic swordsmanship. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has improved. Experience +1. Congratulations! You have triggered the career panel, Militia. Shouldn't it be Swordsman or Guard? The fact that I've triggered just the Militia career panel? Ryan felt both joy and disappointment at this moment. The joy was because he had finally triggered a combat career panel, no longer having to rely solely on the blacksmith's apprentice lifestyle career panel, signifying a pleasing first step on the path of martial strength. The disappointment was because this profession seemed weak just from the sound of it. From the name, it was apparent that militia implied it wasn't any serious military force and the strength limit must be very low. However, for someone with zero foundation like me, triggering the militia panel might not be a bad thing.
because it may also mean that it wouldn't be so difficult to raise my profession level. Having come to terms with it, Ryan couldn't help but laugh, his disappointment vanishing.
Within the transparent frame on the retina, the third page can now be turned to, titled Militia, and its content is still densely packed with icons. Among so many icons, only one was lit up: basic swordsmanship. After practicing swordsmanship for a while, Rain discovered that the difficulty of improving basic swordsmanship was higher than that of nailing horseshoes on the blacksmith apprentice panel. You have trained in basic swordsmanship, and your insight has improved. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has been enhanced. Experience +1. After 2 hours, only 1 point was gained. Basic swordsmanship, level 1, 2 out of 100. Rain roughly estimated, this means that if I practice for 8 hours a day, I would need nearly a month to possibly reach level 2. That's not right. On average, I have no way I have 8 hours of practice time. I heard that next week we'll start the dog trainer's introductory training, and the week after next will be archery training, and so on, cycling every 3 months. That means on average, I only get a week each month to practice swordsmanship. Spread out over time, that's equivalent to practicing swordsmanship for 2 hours a day, so it would take at least 3 months to have the chance to advance basic swordsmanship to level 2. Obviously, this pace of improvement was far from satisfying Rain's requirements, because in 3 months, it would be the time for the page's assessment. If there was an opportunity to tread the transcendent path with the position of a manor guard, Rain would definitely prioritize applying for the manor guard. After contemplating for a moment, Rain decided to allocate 1 precious skill point to basic swordsmanship to see the effect of the skill points. In this transcendent world, if I want to make a name for myself, without a doubt, being a swordsmanship genius is a better choice than being a blacksmith genius. Thus, Rain silently commanded in his mind and immediately added 1 point to basic swordsmanship. As a result, basic swordsmanship on the panel went from level 1 to basic swordsmanship level 2, 0 out of 300. Instantly, a surge of memories related to basic swordsmanship training flowed into Rain's mind. These memories were fragmented training sequences, flashing through Rain's mind like slides and embedding into his muscle memory. When Rain opened his eyes again and executed basic swordsmanship, it was as smooth as if he had been practicing 8 hours daily for a month straight. Every strike became increasingly fluent. You have trained in basic swordsmanship and your insight has improved. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has been enhanced. Experience +1. Aha! Rain noticed that after advancing basic swordsmanship to level 2, the speed of upgrading the militia profession level seemed to accelerate as well. Could it be that level 2 swordsmanship is driving the increase of the level 1 militia panel? Rain, when did you learn basic swordsmanship? That's not cool, learning basic swordsmanship behind my back. Only then did Rain realize that his best friend George, who had been practicing hard on the side, was now staring at him blankly. Just now, George had noticed that his best friend Rain was skillfully executing basic swordsmanship and couldn't help but questioning it, puzzled. Rain shook his head. No, of course not. Where would I get the money to learn that? George thought about it and nodded. Yeah, that's right. Huh, that's not right. That sounds so off. Rain, you're saying you must be a swordsmanship genius, George exclaimed, his eyes wide open in surprise. That, shouldn't count. I just have a bit of a knack for basic swordsmanship. George thought for a moment and nodded. That's true. Basic swordsmanship is only the most rudimentary introductory skill, and it doesn't mean you're a swordsmanship genius. I've heard my brother say that the nobles study family swordsmanship passed down through generations, which is much more difficult than basic swordsmanship. Oh, is that so? Rain was taken aback, but then he didn't give it much thought. After all, he had just started out with basic swordsmanship, and meals needed to be eaten 1 bite at a time. It was better to first master basic swordsmanship before anything else. A tall building rises from the ground.
So, Rain didn't idle away any more time and continued to sweat profusely on the side. Watching the continuous +1 in experience, Rain was fully focused and exceedingly motivated. Even George was stunned on the side. Was this his lazy best friend? What the hell? Wasn't he tired? It was the same when he was fixing donkey hooves. Rain was full of determination, like a youth invigorated daily. George also kept encouraging himself, aiming to keep up with his best friend. But after a while of practicing, he realized it was really dull, tedious, tiring, and hard to keep up with. At this time, the fake second-generation rich kids nearby also noticed the changes in Rain. Bushy brow, look, something's off with that kid Rain. At first he was fumbling around, but it's just been over an hour, and now he seems to have gotten the hang of it. Bushy brow followed Freckles' gaze, and after observing Rain's movements for a few moments, wore a ghost-stricken look. Damn, Rain definitely practiced before. He's nearly caught up to me. What? That impressive? Isn't it said that Rain's family is just a tenant farmer's family? Where would they get the money to learn basic swordsmanship? Exactly, and you see George, that boy, he and Rain are best buddies. It doesn't make sense that Rain would learn swordsmanship under poor conditions, but George, who is better off, didn't learn. The freckled boy beside them, glancing at George, who was still clumsily waving a wooden sword, pointed out a critical fact. In contrast, Rain's skillful swordsmanship was almost blinding. The group of pseudo-second-generation kids immediately fell into contemplation. Could it be that Rain is a swordsmanship prodigy? Absolutely impossible. They might be willing to admit that there are geniuses in the world, but that genius definitely could not be the son of a farmer like Rain. The swordsmanship instructor Humbert had also noticed Rain's changes and couldn't help but being greatly surprised in his heart. For him, who had been teaching child servants in the manor for many years, if Rain had indeed not learned basic swordsmanship before, then Rain's current level of swordsmanship might not be the highest, but it was definitely the fastest improving one. At first, when Rain executed those 3 basic moves, they were stiff and poor, clearly the work of a swordsmanship novice. But now, he seemed to have been practicing hard for 1 or 2 months and had become very adept. Could it be that Rain possessed an extremely high comprehension for swordsmanship? Or a natural understanding with the sword? Humbert decided to observe a bit longer. After all, some people like to be a little clever. This had happened before in previous child servant training sessions. Some child servants deliberately hid the fact that they had learned basic swordsmanship, initially making him very hopeful, but then their progress nearly came to a standstill. So the lie was quickly exposed. Because it's easy to tell the difference between someone who had learned earlier and someone who truly has talent as time goes on. Actually, Rain was already being quite restrained, intentionally slowing down the speed and accuracy of his ironwood swords chopping, otherwise it would have been even more dazzling. While the child servants were undergoing basic swordsmanship training, sons of the low-level nobility and wealthy merchants had also come to the outer fort's central area to practice swordsmanship. Leading them was the noble girl with the chestnut ponytail. As the youngest daughter of the Habsburg Count, wherever Clea went, she was the center of attention. Clea glanced over and saw the child servants practicing their basic swordsmanship. She nodded to herself. Not bad. The training of the manor's child servants was well implemented. Knight Lloyd was really dedicated. Oh! After casually glancing at the child servants, Clea immediately noticed that 2 or 3 of them stood out from the rest of the group with their swordsmanship. First was a freckled boy who was seriously practicing the 3 styles of basic swordsmanship, looking capable. He was one of the more remarkable among the child servants. Second was the tall boy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, who had the most refined basic swordsmanship of all the child servants, but it seemed to be set in stone and made no progress after several practices. This was most likely someone who had practiced basic swordsmanship beforehand. He could be skipped over. The last was a black-haired skinny boy who stood at the very edge of the group, currently practicing while dripping with sweat. Even though his posture seemed far from standard to Clea, and even the continuity of force application had some issues, one could tell he was working hard. What particularly caught Clea's eye was that she noticed after several repetitions, his movements visibly became a bit more standard. This rate of improvement seemed like a promising seedling. Clea tilted her head slightly and beckoned to Shadia, the chief maid standing behind her, and asked, "Shadia, who is that, the black-haired boy on the far right?" "That is Rain, a farmer's child. His parents are tenants of the manor." "And the freckled boy?" "That is Leonard, the son of the beach hotel in Flashgold Town." Clea nodded, not saying anything further. At that moment, a nobleman who was paying attention to Clea couldn't help but speak out. "Lady Clea, they're just a bunch of lowly commoners, not worthy of your noble concern." "Dennis, these are all subjects of the Habsburg family, not the low-born you speak of." Clea glanced unhappily at the nobleman, retorting. She had heard that in the new continent, the commoners of the Eagle Federation were starting to run for parliament, yet many nobles in the ancient empire still believed their nobility was inborn and that commoners were naturally inferior and ugly. This kind of bad habit made Clea feel very helpless. After being rebuked by Clea, the noble youth named Dennis clearly had a hint of anger on his face, but he did not dare to make a scene, only enduring in silence.
5 days later, as Rhine gradually demonstrated swordsmanship skills at a level 2 standard, the observing swordsmanship instructor Humbert was mostly convinced that Rhine possessed an extremely high understanding of swordsmanship. Frankly speaking, Rhine was a swordsmanship prodigy, but only a common one in 100. This made Humbert look at Rhine in a new light. With proper training, he had the makings of a guard, or even a captain of the guard. Today, we will begin sparring with swords. In swordsmanship, if you want to improve quickly, you need a sparring partner. And the sparring partner should not be chosen at random. The best is someone of equal strength. Only then can your swordsmanship improve the most. Humbert's ringing voice echoed across the training field. "Rhine, Richard, the two of you, come up and demonstrate the sparring. The rest of you watch closely," Humbert called out. The man with thick eyebrows was none other than Richard. "Yes, instructor," the two men said in unison. After speaking, they quickly stepped out from the ranks and positioned themselves in front of the troop, assuming the initial stance of basic swordsmanship, with the tips of their ironwood swords pointing at each other. Thick Eyebrow felt an indescribable anxiety and irritation about Rhine's recent changes. Previously, when Rhine stood out while fixing donkey hooves or nailing horseshoes, he did not care at all, because his goal was to become a manor guard, and it was clear from his studying basic swordsmanship with his relatives in advance for the past 2 years. But what he did not expect was that during the swordsmanship training, Rhine once again attracted the attention of the swordsmanship instructor Humbert. This he found difficult to accept. If this continued, this kid Rhine would sooner or later become his formidable rival. Moreover, Rhine had fought with him before, and he had come off worse. So Thick Eyebrow had been thinking all along whether he should accidentally hurt Rhine during the sparring, maybe even to the point where Rhine would be unable to hold a sword. "Begin!" Right after Humbert's command, Rhine and Thick Eyebrow both thrust their swords at the same time. But Rhine immediately noticed that Thick Eyebrow's sword was slightly faster. This was due to the other's taller stature, longer reach, and more practiced basic swordsmanship, giving him an advantage. Instantly, Rhine quickly changed his move and used the strong sword body to block the opponent's thrust. Bang! The ironwood swords clashed with a dull sound. Rhine stepped back 3 paces, while Thick Eyebrow only stepped back 1, clearly showing he had the upper hand. Thick Eyebrow showed a look of triumph. "No matter how prodigious you are, kid, it'll be at least half a year before you can surpass me." But Rhine's expression remained calm, as he had anticipated the situation all along. Firstly, when it comes to height, Thick Eyebrow was nearly a head taller than me, which naturally meant he had much longer reach. This is quite advantageous in a sword fight.
Secondly, with nearly 2 years of studying basic swordsmanship, thick eyebrow skills were not something Rhine's current level 2 basic swordsmanship could compare to. Rhine estimated that, converted into the system's display of swordsmanship levels, thick eyebrow swordsmanship skill should have reached a level 3 standard. Rhine continuously blocked thick eyebrow's multiple attacks, and it was fraught with danger. Although there was no threat to his life, the heavy strikes of the ironwood sword were enough to cause excruciating pain. If I don't increase my own swordsmanship level, I'm definitely going to lose this match. What is Instructor Humbert's purpose in having me spar with thick eyebrow this time? To motivate me to strive harder after a defeat, or to further stimulate my potential? Bang, bang, bang. The dull sounds of the ironwood swords kept coming. Humbert, standing with his arms crossed, watched the duel with an impassive face. Although he had already made up his mind that if nothing unexpected happened, thick eyebrow would win the bout, then Rhine, having undergone a minor setback, should be inspired to strive harder. Good steel needs to be hammered. At this moment, the tall Clea took the lead, accompanied by a group of nobles and rich merchant sons riding into the outer fort from outside, seemingly having just finished their horseback riding training. On their high vantage point, they clearly saw 2 servant boys sparring. The sweaty Rhine also sensed the hostility from thick eyebrow, because several times the opponent had deliberately aimed at his vital points. Damn it! Holding a grudge, are you? No wonder this bastard has been so quiet these past few days. So he's been waiting for me here. Serious injury? To put me out of action for 1 or 2 months? Fuck! This is utterly intolerable. Rhine's face showed a trace of fierceness. Add points. As Rhine decidedly used a skill point, in an instant, basic swordsmanship rose from level 2 to level 3. At the same time, fragments of training memories regarding basic swordsmanship also flooded into his mind. Meanwhile, the thick-eyebrowed man noticed that Rhine had a moment of blankness. He inwardly thought, "Good opportunity." With that, a fierce look crossed his face as he stepped forward and chopped down at Rhine's right shoulder. If this blow were to hit, lying down for 10 days to half a month would be considered mild, and moreover, it was very likely that he could not study swordsmanship for 1 or 2 months. Facing the thick eyebrows man's attack, in an instant, Rhine felt the wooden sword in his hand as if it was an extension of his own arm. That feeling was as though the long sword was an extension of his arm. In the blink of an eye, Rhine once again blocked strongly with the sword horizontally. Bang! But 2 wooden swords struck each other, once again making a dull sound. But this time, Rhine firmly caught it and did not retreat. The thick-eyebrowed man, using the recoil from the clash, smoothly spun around and executed a spinning downward chop, swiftly aiming for Rhine's face and eyes. At this moment, the thick-eyebrowed man felt incredibly exhilarated. This move was him performing above his swordsman level. In his mind, there was no way Rhine could block it. At the time, all he had to do was pretend that it was an accidental injury and act the part. Huh! The nickname One-Eyed Rhine doesn't sound too bad. The corner of the thick-eyebrowed man's mouth curled up with a tiny trace of smugness. This downward chop immediately made the onlooking boys exclaim in surprise. George was watching Rhine anxiously, unsure if his close friend could fend off this attack. Swordsmanship instructor Humbert was poised and ready to intervene and block the sword. A jolt of alarm shot through Rhine's heart, and in an instant he put power into his waist, instinctively leaned back quickly, and, using the strong blade, once again shielded himself, blocking the thick-eyebrowed man's fierce attack. Then, using the strength of his abdominal muscles, he sprang up and counterattacked rapidly. Snap! The thick-eyebrowed man's wrist, holding the sword, was struck heavily by Rhine, and the wooden sword dropped in response. The swift reversal of the situation left the surrounding youths dumbfounded. Suddenly, it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. This sort of instinctive intuition with swordsmanship seems like I underestimated myself before. Was Humbert both surprised and slightly excited? And at a distance, Clea, daughter of Earl Habsburg, also had a glint of admiration in her beautiful eyes. I remember Shadia saying that this black-haired boy seems to be named Rhine. His father is a tenant farmer of the manor. Very good, a clean family background. Maybe I could try nurturing him. Whether or not he could seize the opportunity, that remains to be seen in his performance. Rhine wins. Swordsmanship instructor Humbert immediately announced loudly with an approving expression. The thick-eyebrowed man, expressionless, watched Rhine's retreating figure as he left the field, feelings of resentment rising in his heart. "Go on and be smug, Rhine. Just you wait, damn it." He had already thought of another way to deal with Rhine. He had originally been too proud to stoop to such methods. But this brat Rhine was improving too quickly that it gave him a feeling of alarm and dread. His family ran a tavern for many years, and the thick-eyebrowed man knew many people from all walks of life. For instance, Drunk Jack was a great choice. Having been a mercenary, was no ordinary talent. Rhine, stepping off the field, suddenly stiffened. Then he was overjoyed. The system notification read as follows. Your skill, basic swordsmanship, has improved. Experience, plus 17. You have experienced a battle, militia professional experience points, plus 9. A short bout of sparring, and I actually gained 9 points of professional experience points. This is...
However, after that defeat, it's clear that even if he suggests sparring, the other party will definitely refuse. What a pity! Rain glanced around at the young servants. The only one with strength close to his was thick eyebrows, so choose Freckles? As Rain was pondering, swordsmanship instructor Humbert shouted loudly, "Pair up yourselves and practice!" Thick Eyebrows directly chose Freckles for the practice. This meant Rain could only practice with George. But basically, with one exertion of force, Rain could defeat George, which greatly reduced the effectiveness of Rain's practice. This scene was clearly seen by Humbert, who had always been paying attention to Rain. After thinking for a moment, the opportunity-seeking Humbert stepped forward and said, "Rain, come here. Let's spar a bit." The words of swordsmanship instructor Humbert took all the young servants by surprise, and the gaze with which Thick Eyebrows and the group of pretenders looked at Rain was filled with even more jealousy. Clearly, this also startled Rain. Although he had improved the basic swordsmanship to level 3, in terms of strength, he was definitely no match for Humbert. But upon further thinking, Rain was overjoyed. Instructor Humbert was planning to feed him moves. Rain checked the militiaman's profession panel again. Basic swordsmanship, level 3, of 20 out of 500, was still far from leveling up, but his current militiaman profession level was already militiaman level 1 of 69 out of 100. If he could practice with an expert, Rain was sure that he could soon raise his militiaman profession level to level 2. "Yes, Instructor Humbert." "Rain, don't be nervous. Attack me," Humbert said, smiling encouragingly. Rain nodded, bowed slightly to Instructor Humbert, and then assumed the basic swordsmanship starting stance. The next second, Rain's right hand held the ironwood short sword level with his chest, the tip pointing outward. His right foot took a step. He pushed off with the tip of his foot, propelling his whole body forward like an arrow shot from a bow toward Humbert. It was a standard striding thrust. Facing swordsmanship instructor Humbert, Rain's strike was not held back, but was made with full force. Bang!
The dull sound of ironwood meeting echoed. Humbert parried Rain's thrust with a swing of his sword and quickly delivered a chopping blow, forcing Rain to retreat and block immediately. Upon clashing, Rain detected that Instructor Humbert controlled his strength to a very subtle degree. Almost every swing of the sword was almost the same as Rain's limit in strength. Their exchange was extremely fast, and in just over 10 seconds they had exchanged more than a dozen moves back and forth. Bang! After another clash, they quickly separated. The sparring ended. "Very good, Rain. Take a rest." Humbert was very satisfied with Rain's performance just now. It was clear to all the young servants below that Instructor Humbert was feeding moves to Rain. This was akin to the special coaching given in the past. Only top students got this kind of treatment. Now all the young servants looked at Rain with jealousy. This kid had talent not only in blacksmithing, but now in swordsmanship as well, which was really... Among them, Thick Eyebrows was burning with the most jealousy, his eyes turning red with anger. "Damn it, Rain! If it weren't for this brat, now Instructor Humbert's focus would definitely be on me. The practice partner, too, would definitely be me." Meanwhile, Rain was catching his breath deeply, his forehead covered in fine beads of sweat. Whew! Whew! The short battle with Instructor Humbert had drained Rain of a lot of physical strength and spirit, because the pressure Humbert gave him was far greater than Thick Eyebrows. Having regained his breath, he once again checked the system notifications. "Your skill, Basic Swordsmanship, has gained improvement. Experience plus 21. You have experienced a battle. Militia Profession experience points plus 12. Hiss! That's a lot of experience. That brief sparring session of less than half a minute was equivalent to nearly 3 days of hard training on my own." Of course, this was the result of Humbert deliberately suppressing his own strength and feeding the moves to me. Seeing that Rain seemed to have recovered, Humbert, with a smile on his face, leisurely walked up to him and said, "Rain, your basic swordsmanship is now on par with a regular militiaman. But don't be complacent. Continue to train hard." "Thank you for the compliment, Instructor. I will keep working hard," Rain promptly replied respectfully. Humbert smiled and nodded. He glanced at the sunset about to dip below the horizon. It was Saturday, and the servant boys could go home. So he turned to the servant boys and announced, "Today's swordsmanship practice is over. You are dismissed." At once, the already exhausted servant boys couldn't help but cheer. Many of them flopped down on the ground to rest. Humbert then leisurely prepared to leave the outer castle courtyard. At that moment, he casually noticed Rain by his side, staring intently at him, which made him curiously ask, "Rain, what is it? Is there something you need?" Humbert was quite fond of this young man with a natural talent for swordsmanship. His steadfast character displayed during intense training deeply reminded him of his own younger days. Humbert, may I have another bout with you?" Rain asked with a hopeful expression. Such a great opportunity to earn extra points was not to be missed. Humbert, unaware of Rain's inner thoughts at that moment, thought Rain's youthful spirit of not wanting to lose was coming through. He smiled and looked Rain up and down before saying, "Sure, but, Rain, are you sure you don't need to rest a bit?" "As long as you want, I can keep practicing with you." "Really, Instructor?" The joy on Rain's face was evident. At this point, Rain was nearly at his physical limit, but the chance to have personal training with Humbert was too good to pass up, especially since dog trainer training was starting next week. Therefore, Rain hesitated no more and allocated the few attribute points he had reserved during his blacksmith apprentice upgrade directly to his strength. Suddenly, a warm flow surged from his heart and spread throughout his body. In an instant, all of Rain's fatigue vanished. Boosting points for recovery. Powerful. After this increase, Rain's strength reached 6 points. Roughly on par with the average adult male in this world. Name, Rain Carlin. Profession, blacksmith apprentice, level 3 of 0 out of 500. Militia level 1 of 81 out of 100. Constitution, 5. Strength, 6. Agility, 6. Spirit, 8. Unpair. The sparring resumed. After 3 rounds of sparring, Humbert was sweating profusely, while Rain still had a hungry look in his eyes, gazing eagerly at him, which made Humbert's scalp tingle a bit. "You know what, Rain? Sometimes overtraining isn't necessarily good. It's important to balance work and rest." Rain gave a thumbs-down sign and shimmered even stronger, saying to himself, "Instructor, I'm not tired." Rain firmly responded. Looking at his panel showing Militia level 1 of 99 out of 100, Rain clearly didn't want to remain just 1 point short of leveling up. "Just 1 point away from upgrading my militia profession level." "Instructor, push it a bit," Rain shouted internally. After a moment of silence, Humbert softly said, "Rain, it's getting dark and, well, I have some things to take care of at home." This, faced with Humbert's subtle refusal, Rain felt helpless. He can only reluctantly watch as the back of his swordsmanship instructor Humbert quickly receded.
Just as Rhine fretted over that single experience point, an attractive maid dressed in a gray uniform approached him and said, "Rhine, Chief Maid Shadia asks for your presence in the lower back garden." Rhine, momentarily taken aback, hesitated briefly before nodding in acquiescence. "All right, I'll be there momentarily. George, you go on ahead and let my parents know that I may be late for dinner, asking them not to wait for me." George, who had been waiting at the side, nodded. However, he was quite puzzled. When had Rhine gotten to know Chief Maid Shadia? After all, the chief maid is a senior servant, second only to the butler and the treasurer in the Habsburg manor. Soon, Rhine followed the maid, passing through the towering back doors of the castle and stepping into its rear gardens for the first time. "Rhine, please come in. Chief Maid Shadia is inside," said the beautiful maid with a slight smile before she took her leave. Rhine nodded slightly in thanks for the maid's guidance. At this moment, he already had some speculations in his heart, but some things had to wait until the moment of revelation to be confirmed. When Rhine entered the garden, he saw the lady standing by the flower beds, none other than the chief maid Shadia, likely in her 40s. Dressed in a refined black maid uniform with a stern expression, she exuded an air of severity. But the protagonist in the back garden was not the chief maid. It was instead the noble young lady who was not far from her, standing in the center of the garden. At that moment, she was fully engrossed in swinging her dual-handed greatsword, seemingly in contemplation of some sort of swordsmanship. This was an incredibly pleasant surprise for Rhine. He had not expected to catch the attention of such a distinguished individual. He always thought it would be quite an honor to attract the attention of combat instructor Humbert. Exaggerating a bit, having the attention of Habsburg Manor's butler and knight, Lord Lloyd, would even be better. But he never expected to capture the attention of a noble young lady. He had heard of her identity, the youngest daughter of the Earl, her status far above that of the Lord Lloyd, the butler and knight of Habsburg Manor. "Rhine, there are swords over there. Pick one and attack me." Lady Crea stopped her movements, turned to Rhine and instructed. Had Rhine not anticipated such an event, his heart surely would be in turmoil at this moment. "As you wish, Lady Crea." As Rhine approached the rack of weapons, he realized that the swords were all sharpened steel longswords of various types, short swords, knightly longswords, bastard swords, and even dual-handed greatswords, all seeming to be of exceptional quality. After some thought, Rhine chose a knight's longsword that was about the same length as the training ironwood sword he was familiar with, and stood ready in the center of the garden. This was his first time, in either his past or present life, holding such a sharp weapon, about to engage in a battle with someone. He couldn't help but feel tense inside. "If you're ready, Then let's begin, Kreia said with a slight smile, her dual-handed greatsword now exchanged for a bastard sword. Rhine nodded. Whoosh! Kreia immediately delivered a downward slash at Rhine, who instinctively blocked with his sword horizontally. Clang! The sound of metal striking metal rang out. But this was just the beginning. Kreia followed up with a rapid three-strike combination. Suddenly, Rhine's pupils shrank and swiftly retreated. Even though he kept retreating, he was barely able to defend, with no chance to counterattack. 3 seconds. He lasted only 3 seconds. In this sparring session with Kreia, he resisted for merely 3 seconds before he was swiftly defeated. This was in spite of the fact that Kreia had deliberately held back, controlling her physical abilities to match Rhine's level. Rhine sensed this too, especially since he had seen her swinging around a 70 or 80-pound dual-handed greatsword as if it were a mere stick. Yet, this 3-second skirmish brought Rhine. Your skill in basic swordsmanship has improved, experience points plus 15. Having engaged in combat, your militia profession experience points plus 4. Congratulations, your militia profession level has increased. Remaining attribute points, 1. Remaining skill points, 1. You've learned the basic swordsmanship quite well. It's quite rare among young servants. You do have a certain talent for swordsmanship, but it's not top-notch. Unfortunately, your physical condition is a bit lacking. The hope of becoming a formal knight isn't very great. It seems I was hoping for too much. It's really difficult to find someone with knight potential among ordinary people. Wait a minute. Who was he down on? At this moment, the look that the noble girl gave him made him realize why it said that women are the driving force for a man's determination to become stronger. Wait a minute, Lady Clea. I want to try one more time. Can you give me another chance? Rhine said, looking up at the girl with a burning eyes. Oh? Can you handle it? The girl looked at Rhine with a half smile. At that moment, Rhine really wanted to shout to Clea that when a beauty asks a man if he can handle it, would any man give a second type of answer? Of course he could. Without hesitation, Rhine immediately added the attribute points he had just gained from leveling up to Militia Level 2 into Agility. In the martial world, only speed is unbreakable. It was precisely because Clea's sword was so fast that he hadn't been able to react in time. When his agility went from 6 to 7 points, a warm surge pumped from his heart, quickly spreading throughout his body, and suddenly Rhine felt a renewed sense of strength throughout his body. That's the best part about adding points. It always fully restores your stamina. The girl was about to refuse, but seeing the determined look in Rhine's eyes as he got up again, she nodded and said, "Okay, but this is your last chance." Rhine gave a slight bow, and the next second, whoosh! The speed at which Rhine stepped forward had increased by at least 20%, which slightly startled Clea. Clang! With his stamina fully recovered and his agility increased by 1 point, as well as his familiarity with the steel sword from the previous fight. Due to several contributing factors, his combat ability was now a whole level higher than before. This level of strength? The more the girl fought, the more she became surprised. Ding, ding, clang! The two engaged in rapid combat. The chief maid watching from the side also had a change in the way she looked at Rhine, shifting from calm to surprised. Stop! After a sudden thrust of her sword, the girl repelled Rhine and said, "Not bad, Rhine. You can go back now." Now Rhine was a bit confused. Did she acknowledge him or not? He had deliberately kept some skill points in reserve in case Lady Clea was not satisfied, so he could... But given her current stance, all Rhine could do was give a slight bow and say, "Goodbye, Lady Clea." Then Rhine turned and left. The girl watched Rhine's departing figure intently. She had been ready to give up, but Rhine had suddenly given her a pleasant surprise. From his expression, it seemed that even the strength he had just displayed wasn't his limit. It appears he still had something in reserve.
Interesting. If that's the case, then he might indeed be a knight prospect worth cultivating. However, there's no rush. She needs to investigate his background first. At this moment, Shadia, pondering, asked with a hint of confusion, "Miss, why do you value this Rhine so much?" Although Rhine seems to have decent talent, both young Master Dennis and young Master Marcos are already level 3 knight attendants, and they are much stronger than Rhine, who is about the same age. In the chief maid's eyes, Rhine might have good talent, but starting knight training now was just too late. She didn't think Rhine had any chance of catching up to Dennis and Marcos. Yet, if Rhine's future was just to become an ordinary guard, then he wouldn't be worth the trouble the mistress was taking. Shadia, Rhine is fundamentally different from them. Dennis is the son of Baron Norman and has been practicing the family-inherited knight breathing method since he was a young age. His current strength is proof of mediocre talent at best. And Marcos is the son of the president of the Bordeaux Merchants Guild. He has been taking all sorts of potions to enhance his attributes since he was a child. It may seem like he's making fast progress, but he has already exhausted his potential, and the possibility of becoming a formal knight is very low. Shadia's eyes widened. It was the first time she had heard her mistress talk about this. "So, you mean to say that Rhine has high potential?"
The girl did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned around, bent down, and gently stroked a pure white horseshoe orchid in the back garden, creating a beautiful curve. Search the novelfire.net website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. Shadia, do you know what conditions a person needs to meet to become a transcendent? The chief maid furrowed her brow, deep in thought over the question. Though she was literate and often read books, they were mostly about noble etiquette, introductions to noble emblems, or the daily management of estates. The scope of this question, frankly, exceeded her knowledge. After a good while, the chief maid, frowning delicately and with some hesitation, replied, "Talent?" The girl let out a gentle smile. "You've got one right. To become a transcendent, one must have 4 conditions simultaneously: determination, talent, perseverance, and opportunity. I had seen determination and perseverance in Rhine, which is why I asked you to call him to the back garden. Just now, I confirmed that he indeed possesses considerable talent." Upon hearing this, the chief maid said with sudden realization, "I see, but, Miss, you just mentioned 3 qualities that Rhine possesses, but didn't you say one needs 4? Shadia, are you talking about opportunity? I am his opportunity," the girl declared, her face blooming into a radiant smile. Inside the Flash Gold Town Inn, bushy brows were deep in conversation with a burly adult male in a secluded corner. "Here are 10 silver coins. Just break that kid Rhine's sword hand, and it'll be enough," Richard said sourly to the adult male beside him. "Skillful, even with a talent? If his hand is broken, I'd like to see how the boy will learn swordsmanship." "Just 10 silver coins? That's not enough to buy me 2 days' worth of drink." The man known as Drunkard Jack was still somewhat sturdy in appearance, having once been a mercenary. Though he now spent his years frequenting taverns or mingling with streetwalkers, his strength was no longer what it once was. "Richard, make it at least 15 silver coins, and I'll take care of that kid for you." Drunkard Jack gestured for more money, greed shining in his eyes. "Fine, 15 it is, but you have to make sure this doesn't get out." Richard gritted his teeth and agreed to the price increase. After all, with the money he had on hand, he couldn't afford to hire a real expert. He could only rely on people like Drunkard Jack. But to deal with Rhine, that would suffice, right? He should be heading home to stay the night, and tomorrow evening he will return to the manor. So, Drunkard Jack, if you're going to act, seize the opportunity and make your move quickly. Burp, no worries. Drunkard Jack burped, patting his chest in assurance. Just a little brat. Before leaving, Richard gave it some thought and reminded Drunkard Jack. That kid's got some talent for swordsmanship. Don't capsize in the gutter. Puh! Don't forget, I used to be a mercenary. A mercenary, Drunkard Jack muttered, scoffing at Richard's caution. After Richard left, Drunkard Jack planned to have a couple more drinks. But as he lifted his head, he inadvertently caught sight of a familiar figure walking past the front of the tavern. Isn't that the kid, Rhine? Drunkard Jack was overjoyed at once. Tisk, tisk, easy money. Immediately, Drunkard Jack stood up and began to follow him. At dusk, as the sun set in the west, Rhine hurried home pondering what move Lady Kreia would make next. Would she recruit him directly, or would she say... Suddenly he heard the faint sound of footsteps from behind. The wind whistled behind his head. The effects of his agility raised to 7 points were now fully displayed. Rhine abruptly darted forward, causing the attacker's planned blow to the back of his head to miss entirely. But Rhine hadn't completely evaded injury. The strike still landed heavily on his back. Smack! A severe pain shot through his back, but it was much better than being hit in the back of the head. At the same time, the attacker behind Rhine had not expected his seemingly guaranteed strike to miss, and the person froze in surprise. Seizing the moment of the attacker's hesitation, Rhine quickly turned around and grabbed the stick used to attack him, pulling it with force. The attacker, of course, was not going to let go, and immediately gripped the stick tightly, but in his haste, he still staggered from Rhine's pull. With this pull, the attacker's mind momentarily relaxed. Indeed, his opponent was just a youngster, whose strength was far from matching his own. Even with the element of surprise, the young foe couldn't seize the stick from his hands, which was quite weak. As he was thinking, snap! Rhine delivered an extremely swift uppercut kick, striking hard at the center of his adversary's groin. Ah! The attacker's face went ashen as a pig's liver. Releasing the stick in agony, clutching his groin with both hands, and immediately squatting down. Rhine, holding the stick, aimed it at the attacker's temple and struck down hard. Bang! Without even a grunt, the attacker crumpled to the ground. Only then did Rhine start to breathe heavily. Although the struggle had lasted less than 10 seconds, it was his first time being attacked in this world. It was a real fight. Luckily, he had made significant progress in all his physical attributes and swordsmanship recently. Otherwise, he might not have been able to react to the attacker's first blow in time. He could have been taken down with just one strike of the cudgel. Rhine quickly looked up and scanned the surroundings. At this time, most of the residents of Flashgold Town had already gone home for dinner, and there were few people on the nearby streets. And Rhine's home was at the end of the town's main thoroughfare, an isolated location, which meant even fewer passers-by. This meant that almost no one had noticed what had happened here. After a moment's thought, Rhine expended some effort to drag the attacker into the nearby woods, and found a vine about the thickness of a thumb to tie the person in loops around a large tree. It was then that Rhine ripped off the black scarf the attacker had used as a disguise. Isn't this Drunkard Jack who loiters in the tavern all the time? Flashgold Town was not a big town, and Rhine immediately recognized the person's identity. After a bit of contemplation, Rhine thought of several suspects who might have been behind the steed. Bushy brows, freckles, or was it the other two scions? Clearly, Bushy Brows was the most likely. After thinking it over, Rhine woke Drunkard Jack up. "Rhine, you little brat, untie me right now, or else—" Once again, Jack's mouth was gagged with the smelly sock.
Ryan looked at Drunkard Jack fiercely and said, "Drunkard Jack, it seems you haven't grasped the situation. We're in the forest, and if I let a little blood, it won't be long before wild animals are attracted. You don't have relatives in Flashgold Town, and no one cares about you there. So, when people notice your disappearance, it's likely half a month will have passed. You say—"
At first, Drunkard Jack's eyes held a strong sense of disdain. "You, a mere brat, have the audacity to kill someone?" He simply didn't believe it. But when Ryan laid out a very feasible plan, word by word, his eyes slowly filled with horror. And Ryan immediately caught the flash of terror that passed through the other's eyes. He had a chance. This was nothing but a hollow tough guy. So Ryan continued to threaten with an emotionless face. And at that time, what would you have left? Probably not even your bones. But no one will suspect me, because I'm just a child. At this point, Drunkard Jack's expression seemed to start yielding. Go to hell. Still a child? Is there such a ruthless child? Richard only wanted me to break your hand, but damn it, you're directly after my life. Drunkard Jack had always been a coward. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stopped being a mercenary after doing it for some time, because he felt that the blood-spattered life of a mercenary really didn't suit him. This time, as soon as Ryan removed the stinky sock from his mouth, Drunkard Jack immediately shouted, "It was the tavern keeper's kid, Richard. He gave me some money to break your hand." Upon hearing this, Ryan knew it was that bushy-browed guy. Ryan hadn't ruled out the possibility that Drunkard Jack was lying, but it's very hard to lie when one is scared. Of course, the most important thing was that the bushy-browed guy had the motive to do this. His natural talent in swordsmanship seemed to really irk Bushy-Brows. Recalling the look in Bushy-Brow's eyes when he was defeated in the day's sparring, Ryan quickly connected the two events. Meanwhile, in the dense forest nearby, a silent spectator had appeared. Just now, Hamilton had heard an unusual noise from the woods. As the newly appointed town sheriff of Flashgold Town, he was quite concerned about the local security. So he immediately slipped into the woods to investigate. What he saw was surprising. A slender youth had tied up a burly man and was interrogating him. With just a glance, Hamilton recognized the burly man tied to the tree. It was Drunkard Jack, a man with a terrible reputation in Flashgold Town. This good-for-nothing often loitered around committing petty theft and boasted about his mercenary past to several widows every day. As a potential threat to local security, Hamilton had been watching him closely ever since he came to Flashgold Town. Quickly, he learned the whole story from Drunkard Jack's interrogation. He hadn't expected that this daring youth was just a commoner's son and was currently undergoing servant training at the Habsburg Manor. An interesting little bugger. Following Hamilton's gaze, we turn back to Ryan. Ryan appeared deep in thought, but he hadn't really considered that Bushy-Brows, with his thick eyebrows and big eyes, could be so devious. As for the man in front of him, Ryan began to size up Drunkard Jack. This made Drunkard Jack think that Ryan was really about to bleed him, and he couldn't help but cry out in terror, "Ryan, stop! Let's talk this out nicely." Smack! Ryan struck Drunkard Jack hard on the head, prompting a miserable howl from him. "What number is this?" "Huh?" Drunkard Jack's eyes widened as he stared at the single finger that Ryan was holding. He quickly said, "It's 1, 1." Wrong answer. Smack! Ryan struck his head hard again with a stick. "What number is this?" Ryan asked again calmly. Drunkard Jack's eyes bulged as he stared at the hand Ryan held out.
He wasn't seeing things. There was only one finger. One! It's one! Stop hitting me! Still wrong. Smack! Immediately after, Ryan struck Jack's forehead with his stick again. "How many is this?" Ryan asked, gesturing with his fingers again. By this time, Drunkard Jack was not feeling very good at all, and wailed with a crying tone, "Whatever you say it is." Not knocked senseless yet?" Ryan muttered to himself. Although he spoke softly, Hamilton, not far away and with formidable strength, heard everything clearly, causing the corners of his mouth to twitch involuntarily. The kid's ruthless enough to dumbfound someone. But soon, Hamilton understood something, and a slight smile formed on his lips. He guessed that this young man actually didn't want to kill Drunkard Jack outright, so he aimed to beat him senseless, avoiding future trouble. However, having an additional murder case in my jurisdiction is not a good thing. So Hamilton took a few steps forward, his leather boots making a sound as they stepped on dried twigs. Meanwhile, Ryan had just noticed Drunkard Jack's money pouch bulging as though it contained a fair amount of coins. This made Ryan's eyes shine with anticipation. Just as he bent down to take the other's money pouch, his body suddenly froze. Then he quickly stood up, turned, and gripping the stick tightly, looked towards the direction from which the noise came. Indistinctly, he saw a tall figure emerging from the dense forest, causing cold sweat to break on Ryan's back, whoosh, in an instant. Moreover, Ryan could barely make out a long sword at the person's waist. This startled Ryan, making the hairs on his body stand on end. They have a weapon. I don't know if they are friend or foe. No, they must be an enemy. I don't recognize any mercenary. I can't risk my life on this. I must first flee into the forest to lose this person and ensure safety. In just a moment, a series of thoughts flashed through Ryan's mind. The next second, Ryan shot into the nearby dense forest like an agile monkey, disappearing in an instant. Hamilton was momentarily dumbfounded, but he immediately realized something and couldn't help showing a face that was both annoyed and amused. Suddenly, as the dirt beneath Hamilton's feet burst apart, his towering figure shot into the dense forest like an arrow released from a bow, moving nearly twice as fast as Ryan. Ryan, meanwhile, was darting left and right through the forest, trying to confuse his pursuer's line of sight, and after maintaining high-speed running for a while, he started to feel the strain on his stamina. He slowed down his pace to listen carefully, and after a while, there seemed to be no movement behind him. So Ryan immediately hid behind a large tree, panting heavily. Whew, whew. He thought to himself, who could that be? Suddenly, a stranger's voice came from beside Ryan. Not bad speed. Ryan, as if struck by lightning, was startled and thought, he won't let me go? He actually chased me this far? Damn it! This made Ryan feel even more certain that the other person was an enemy, not a friend. Instantly, Ryan's face showed determination, and he made a decision. He decided to add his last skill points to his basic swordsmanship. After all, what's the use of points if you've lost your life?
In an instant, Rain's basic swordsmanship skill level 3 had risen to level 4. In his mind, hundreds of training images flashed by like a slideshow. Suddenly, Rain exploded with a fierce energy, wielding the stick he had just picked up, and performed a striding thrust directly at the opponent's face. Since I can't escape, I might as well fight for a chance to survive. This extraordinary and swift strike surprised Hamilton, and his appreciation for Rain increased a notch. Such temperament, speed, and swordsmanship in a common young boy was indeed a rare gift. Snap! However, against Rain's full-powered blow, Hamilton merely extended his right hand and, very ordinarily, gripped and securely fixed the swiftly attacking stick in front of him. No matter how hard Rain tried, he couldn't move the stick at all, which suddenly made his heart sink to the bottom. It's over. The difference in strength is just too great. It was then that Hamilton slowly continued speaking. "Don't be nervous, young man. I'll handle that drunkard Jack for you. I'll make sure he spends a good while in the solitary cell, and afterward I won't let him trouble you again." "Ah, solitary cell? Are you the newly appointed sheriff?" Rain was stunned at first, but then immediately realized and blurted out. Immediately after, Rain carefully sized up the other man. The man was tall and imposing, wearing a male noble's hunting outfit that fit perfectly. With a long sword at his waist, he indeed looked more like a noble than a bandit or a bounty hunter. This slightly eased Rain's mind. "Clever young man. I am indeed the new sheriff of Flashgold Town, Hamilton." Seeing the astonishment on Rain's face, Hamilton couldn't help but show a trace of a smile on his serious face. It wasn't that he wanted to scare Rain, but Rain's quick reactions were somewhat unexpected, leaving him no chance to speak. "Sir, I'm really sorry. I didn't know you were—" Rain clearly detected the goodwill in the other man's words. "There's nothing wrong with what you did to drunkard Jack. After all, he attacked you first, and you were merely defending yourself. However, you just swung a weapon at an imperial baron and the sheriff of Flashgold Town. What do you think I should do to punish you?" Hamilton said, slightly teasing. This... Rain was dumbfounded. The sheriff before him had changed his tone so suddenly. "However, considering your youth, I can forgive you this time, but you need to do something for me." Hamilton seemed not to want to stress Rain further and quickly changed his tone again. "What is it? I won't do anything illegal or disorderly." Rain immediately became alert and shot a glance at Hamilton, realizing that he had been waiting for him. Hamilton was left speechless. Illegal or disorderly? As the sheriff of a town in the Empire, would I ask a child to do something illegal or disorderly? But after thinking it over, he decided to reveal a bit of information to Rain, saying, "I can't tell you the details right now, but you should know about the child disappearances that have been happening from time to time. I'm closely monitoring this issue." Upon hearing this, Rain sighed in relief. So it was about that. Even in his past life, he had a deep disdain for human traffickers. Now, since Sheriff Hamilton had caught him in a bind, if it was just about him cooperating on the child disappearance cases, he could agree to that. Actually, even if he didn't want to agree, the situation compelled him to. Although, do all sheriffs nowadays have such a sense of responsibility? Suddenly, Rain didn't dislike the man in front of him so much. "No, wait, I am still a child. In terms of strength, I'm barely stronger than an ordinary militiaman. What could I possibly help him with?" Rain immediately realized that something might be amiss here. Should he just refuse outright? It won't work. They've got something on me. Forget it. Just play along for now and agree first. Strength. It looks like I need to enhance my strength after all. Okay. However, sir, my abilities are limited. I'm still a child, and I can't help much. Rain spread his hands, his expression showing no fear of boiling water. This couldn't help but make Hamilton laugh. In his heart, he thought, "Still a child? With your disposition, swordsmanship, and speed, I'm afraid most of the militia aren't a match for you. Don't worry, it won't exceed your capabilities," Hamilton said, smiling and shaking his head. "Then, respected sheriff, sir, may I go home now?" "Of course." As soon as Hamilton finished speaking, Rain ran off like a startled rabbit, without looking back.
This made Hamilton shake his head helplessly again. Such a shrewd little guy. However, handling this case indeed requires someone like Rain. It might just have surprising effects. Rain ran all the way near his house before he slowed down, his chest heaving greatly. At this moment, his mood was both excited and scared, along with a bit of regret and disappointment. Everything about tonight's incident was under control. But, unfortunately, I ran into the new sheriff, Hamilton. His strength is too great. Rain thought about it. Skill-wise, Humbert, the servant swordsman, probably isn't his opponent. It seems only the noble young men's instructor, Lord Pires, could possibly fight him. Luckily, he doesn't seem to be a particularly harsh person. Otherwise, I might have been in trouble. Also, what exactly does he want me to help him with? But thinking about how even after continuously boosting my agility and militiaman swordsmanship, I'm still no match for Hamilton, not even forcing out his true strength, it is indeed a bit disheartening. The gap in strength is just too great. I still need to think of a way to enhance my strength quickly. However, today's events, which were almost like actual combat, greatly benefited me. I focused my attention on the system, and the notification was as follows. You have undergone a battle. Militiaman professional experience points plus 23. Your skill basic swordsmanship has been enhanced. Experience points plus 11. You have undergone a battle. Militiaman professional experience points plus 8. The only thing that Rain slightly regretted was that he didn't manage to grab Drunkard Jack's waist pouch. Otherwise, the money inside would have been enough to buy some treats to reward himself and his family. Feeling a tad disappointed, Rain quickly returned home. "Brother, you're back!" Boher immediately gave Rain a big hug as soon as he arrived. Soon after, the family of 4 sat down at the simple dining table and started dinner. The warm oil lamp, the cozy atmosphere, instantly dispelled the disappointment in Rain's heart. Money! I'll definitely find a way to earn it.
Early the next morning, declining his best friend George's suggestion to go to the forest to pick nuts again, Ryan arrived at the blacksmith shop. Upon entering the blacksmith shop, he was immediately greeted by a wave of intense heat. The apprentices were all busy with their own tasks, while the blacksmith Boris Patton was forging an iron sword, which instantly caught Ryan's eye. Just as he was about to move closer to get a better look, Drews, who was working the bellows, eagerly waved at Ryan. "Ryan, you're here!" Hearing this memorable name, the blacksmith apprentices, who had been concentrating on their work, were all startled. Suddenly, a few of the burly apprentices exchanged glances, seeing a sense of urgency in each other's eyes. The expression on their faces seemed to convey, "Why is this kid here again? And this time, he's not even coming in the afternoon, but bright and early in the morning. Bad luck." The blacksmith, Boris, who rarely took the initiative to greet anyone, called out, "Ryan, you're here." "Yes, Uncle Boris." "Oh, you're making a longsword today." Ryan pretended to have just noticed and took 2 steps forward, planning to observe Boris's forging technique. The glowing hot sword embryo was clearly longer than the average one-handed sword. "That's right. Today I'm making a bastard sword for a friend," Boris said succinctly. Ryan suddenly understood. He knew what a bastard sword was, a type of sword that fell between one-handed swords and two-handed swords. It had advantages in length and offensive power over a one-handed sword, and was more convenient to carry than a two-handed sword. Nobility, bounty hunters, or mercenaries often used it, and it required some time and training in order to use it with agility. "By the way, Ryan, last time you got familiar with working the bellows, so continue to help Drews with the bellows today." Boris didn't let Ryan sit idle and quickly gave him a task. "Okay, Uncle Boris." Although it was just working the bellows again, Ryan agreed promptly. Ryan also wanted to learn other things like casting, forging nails, pots, and such, but trust between people takes time to build. If Ryan had money now, he certainly could speed up this relationship, and maybe even get Boris the miser started to teach him to forge some kind of ironware today. But alas, he was poor.
Thinking of this, Ryan felt a strong sense of annoyance toward Hamilton, the newly appointed sheriff. Ryan walked over to the bellows, and Drews, with a joyous expression, quickly stepped aside. "Ryan, you were already skillful at working the bellows last time, so I'll leave this to you." After speaking, Drews moved as agile as a monkey, quickly joining Boris at his side with an eager-to-learn expression, watching the creation of the bastard sword. Ryan smiled to himself, betting that it wouldn't be long before Drews would be assigned to other tasks by Boris. Sure enough, within 5 minutes, Boris sent Drews to smelting iron ingots. Ryan couldn't help but chuckle to himself. Boris Patton was notoriously stingy with his craft in Flashgold Town. Without cold hard cash, he definitely wouldn't teach you anything substantial in a short time. Unless you spent enough time in the blacksmith shop. No longer distracted by watching others, Ryan began to focus on the task of working the bellows. Search the novel FireNet website on Google to access chapters of novels early and in the highest quality. You have performed the bellows work, and your comprehension has increased. Your skill in working the bellows has improved, experience points +3. You focused on the blower, blacksmith apprentice professional experience points +1. Aside from going home at noon to have lunch with his family, Ryan spent the entire Sunday at the blacksmith shop. Of course, the results were gratifying. Ryan flipped to the second page of the framework, the Blacksmith Apprentice Professional Panel. Blacksmith Apprentice Level 3 was more than halfway completed, meaning that if everything went well, he would be able to advance to Level 4 by next Sunday. Blacksmith Apprentice Level 3, 265 out of 500. Stoking Blower Level 3, 395 out of 500. Hoof Trimming Level 2, 295 out of 300. Nailing Horseshoes Level 1, 56 out of 100. As dusk approached, an exhausted Ryan stepped out of the blacksmith shop, ready to return to Hosburg Manor. At the same time, not far from Ryan, something sinister was happening in a secluded alley. In a low house, a skinny boy was about to go out to buy some stuff, when suddenly, his mouth was covered with a piece of rag. Immediately, the skinny boy began to struggle. "Damn it, kid! Behave!" a deep male voice exclaimed. The next second, a sharp dagger, gleaming with a cold light, appeared in front of the boy. Instantly, the little boy dared not to struggle any longer. A piece of hemp rope quickly bounded the little boy tightly, and a piece of coarse cloth was stuffed into his mouth before a pair of strong hands put him into a large black bag. Soon after, 2 burly figures carrying black bags disappeared quickly into the alley. "Boss, what does the higher-up want with so many kids? Including this one, we've already nabbed the 11th child. I heard the other brothers are snatching kids too. Could it be that the nobles' demand for boys and girls has spiked recently? But could the nobles really fancy these skinny, odd-smelling street urchins or poor kids?" Scarface seemed puzzled, turning his head in doubt to ask his companion with the scruffy beard. "Scarface, is this something you need to worry about? The higher-ups have made their request. As long as the money is right, we just do our job. Why bother asking so many questions?" the scruffy-bearded man retorted irritably. But after thinking, he seemed to agree there was some sense in Scarface's words and added, "It's probably not the demand of the nobles in the county town. I heard this might be the request of the Wilderness Brotherhood. But you better not inquire too much about these matters in front of others, or I fear you won't know how you died." Yes, you're right, boss. By the way, boss, we've nearly combed through the northern part of Flashgold Town. In a few days, I'll check out the south side. Be careful. The new Sheriff Hamilton seems to be paying close attention to this matter. It's going to be troublesome if he gets wind of it, warned the man with the scruffy beard. "Don't worry, boss. I push a snack cart along the streets. I can spot suitable targets with one glance," Scarface assured while tapping his chest. "Hey, boss, when we get this batch of money, where should we go to have some fun first? The quality at Flashgold Town's brothels is too low. Shouldn't we go back to the county town for playing for a few days and lay low at the same time?" Scarface seemed to think of something delightful, his face showing a sleazy look. "Damn it, Scarface! You'll end up dead on a woman's body someday." but you also make a point. After we get the money, we'll make a trip back to the county town." The scruffy bearded man consented after thinking. "Wearing the skin mask is so uncomfortable. It's too tight. Boss, can you make me a new one?" The burly man known as Scarface complained. Ryan thought he heard some noise from the nearby alley, but after stopping to listen for a while, he shook his head and continued on his way to Hosburg Manor.
The next morning, the child servants began their dog training apprentice course under the guidance of an old man with a goat beard, accompanied by a sighthound much like the ones from his past life. Rain recognized the breed, long-limbed, with a body shaped like a bow. Both speed and explosive power were truly astonishing. Even their heads seemed designed to reduce wind resistance, longer and more narrow than a usual dog's head, but with strong jaw muscles and a formidable biting force, making them exceptional noble hunting dogs. However, with droopy eyelids, the old man showed little interest in teaching the child servants, evidently just going through the motions. "In some time, each of you will receive a 3-month-old sighthound. During the assessment, if you can command the sighthound to squat, attack, stop, and retrieve, you will be considered to have passed the test," he said. For the rest of the time, the old man had no wish to speak more than necessary with the child servants, instead directing them to the dog kennels on the west side of the outer fort to pick out a puppy, and after that simply let them play with their dogs. Although the child servants were all confused, they were still very happy to have a small dog to play with. In the meantime, Rain paid close attention to the expression of the boy with thick eyebrows. As expected, this guy had something to hide. While playing with the puppies, he often got distracted, frequently casting sidelong glances at Rain. In his eyes was confusion, as if puzzled by something that should have happened, but did not. Rain chuckled silently. The damned thick eyebrows. It's definitely you, bastard." Just as Rain confirmed that the employer was the boy with thick eyebrows, the latter quickly concocted an excuse for the drunkard Jack, which was that Jack hadn't found the chance to make a move on Rain the day before. "Damn it, that good-for-nothing drunkard Jack, always dragging his feet when it's time to get things done. Looks like I must urge him again this Sunday and make him take his shot as soon as possible," he murmured. Since Rain was now certain it was the boy with thick eyebrows, he relaxed and started playing with the puppy. But, as fun as playing with dogs is, having played with them all day long, Rain's strength had made almost no advancement. Moreover, the new job panel that Rain had been looking forward to, such as the dog trainer, had not been activated. This left Rain quite puzzled. Could it be that there was no such profession as a dog trainer? That shouldn't be the case. Rain was at a loss. In the evening, after the dog training session ended, a beautiful maid dressed in a gray uniform came to find Rain and said, "Rain, the chief maid Shadia has asked to see you. Please come with me." The timing of the maid's appearance was not like last time, on a Saturday evening when nearly all the child servants had left.